So three, two, whoa, two, one. Welcome to another live stream of talking about our current situation and using games to help us maybe as a crutch in this situation. I'm Dustin from Board Game with Education. I have a really good friend with me, John Cassie, and he is from Game Level Learn. I'll let him introduce himself a little bit while I check on the stream, introduce the topic as well.
Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Good, good.
Sweet. So, yeah, my name's John Cassie. I'm with Game Level Learn, of course. And you can see here on my shirt, I'm also with a school in Orange County, California called TVT Community Day School, where I am Director of Curriculum and Innovation. And I'm sure if you are an educator working today, in the field, you can appreciate that if you wear a hat like I do, uh, it's busy 10 or 11-hour days every day. Certainly, it has been since we went into the distance learning environment nearly 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, have you guys had a spring break yet?
No, spring break is Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, praise. Who, but in all fairness, we had been planning for years for the kind of catastrophic, must have a business continuity plan ready because we were expecting to need to be ready for a massive earthquake.
Right.
Well, the same basic conditions apply. You can't be on campus because something has happened. Well, instead of it being the campus is physically unsafe because it has been shaken by an earthquake, we're in this, it's socially unsafe, right? And the school has done extraordinary work, and my colleagues have been just over the top in terms of their willingness to help each other, and the students are doing well. I mean, I teach a class of my own, and they're doing okay. Hard to know how this will be when we get back from spring break, and the longer it goes, the harder it gets, right? Which is kind of where, when you and I were talking about this is kind of how we ended up on this theme of the social environment of the classroom,
right.
Classroom culture, right? Because a distance learning environment is a very different, a digitally mediated social space is very different than a physically mediated social space. And we were both sort of like, well, we ought to be thinking about that. And as we riffed on that idea, we sort of came to the conclusion that, well, we got a couple of tools in our toolkit that we might want to share with an audience. And that sort of brought us to this point, because building a classroom culture in the first place, when you're an educator, I mean, that's the first thing you do in September.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Bring everyone together. Let's get this community going. And it's just harder to sustain, in a digital environment. Not impossible. It's not a fatal problem.
Right.
But it's trickier, right? And so that brings us sort of to our conversation,
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is when we chatted, how we landed on games being a great motivator in this particular situation for classroom culture. In the past, right, I've used them as like engagement tools or motivational tools, but now that's a longer project if you want to use games online for engagement, or unless you already have something pre-planned that you've been doing online. So we kind of came up with the idea of doing games distantly to keep students and teachers connected.
Right. Because one of the things that we know is that game environments create stimulating conversations.
Right.
And they create, from emergent gameplay, they create rich and intriguing stories that people remember forever.
Right.
You can ask students of mine who I taught coming up on 25 years ago now. if they can remember things from classes that I taught them. And inevitably, they'll go back to game-based content,
Right,
right?
right.
And we all know, if we've played any games, presumably if you're watching the stream, then you've got an interest in it at least,
Right.
of games where uh, a surprising outcome or reversal or advantage came out of nowhere, and that helps sustain and build your personal social environment. You can drop. This is where in jokes come from, right?
Yeah.
Right, they come from this kind of place, right?
Right.
And students in classes are able to reference back to things that you said as a teacher or that a classmate said, and games can uniquely help bridge that that gap in the lack of the physical connection by building a mental, like a cultural or social connection. They're like threads that weave the story of the class together in a way that the digital environment maybe uh, in and of itself doesn't facilitate.
Right. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
mean, that's the challenge, I think, for a lot of teachers right now.
for
Um,
sure.
what
Yeah.
what are digital tools good at facilitating, and where can we fill the gaps?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are really, really good at sustaining the day-to-day business of school, right? The
Right.
Google Classroom, uh, Google Meet,
Right.
tools like Flipgrid, Seesaw, VoiceThread, a Class Dojo, Edpuzzle. All of these tools are extremely helpful in building a learning environment that sustains the learning, right?
Right.
So many times I've seen on the various social media channels, um, Maslow before Bloom,
Mm.
right? Take care of your students' emotional
Right.
lives first. No long-term harm will come from a delay in picking up how to do long division, or
Right.
not
Right. Right.
really doing the interwar period in European history as tightly as you might want to,
Right.
right? It can all be, when we get back to our regularly scheduled school,
Hmm.
we're going to assess where kids are, what the curriculum looks like, make decisions, backfill, repeat. We're going to get there, right?
Right.
But what can't be done with these tools um, very effectively is keeping that connection and that engagement. So
Right.
we
Right.
hope to offer you some in the next 20, 30 minutes that might do the trick.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about a few.
For
I
sure.
know I'm excited to talk about the last one. I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
share a little bit about it, but I guess we're gonna do social games, like abstract games, and then RPG. So
Yep. Yep. And we hope that you get, as listeners and viewers, a couple of strategies that you might take and try them,
right,
and let us know what you take away from it.
yeah,
Yeah. So Dustin, we're going to start, I think, with you, right? And a tool that both he and I have used to great effect, called Rory's Story Cubes.
or story cubes, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I have the picture here. Maybe see if I can pull it up. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it up. I thought I had it here. Oh no, it's gone.
Oh no.
Maybe if you want to talk about Storymatic, and I'll try to see if I can
Okay.
pull up the picture of Story
Okay.
Cubes.
So here's one of the things that I think you want to take a look at if you can. Okay. It's called the Storymatic, and it's as it says on the box, 6 trillion stories in one little box. Which one will you tell? Now, what I love about Storymatic is that it has these kind of situations and people, like uh, uh, a person who asks what nobody ever asks, and then these kind of situation cards that are like, a cemetery at 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And the concept of the game, the way that it's generally played is you take a couple of these cards, you mash them up, and you sort of tell a story. And it's an exercise in story building and plotting and character development and what have you. But the version of the game that I want to encourage you all to play, if you get this game, and you really ought to, it's not very expensive. I think it's $20, $25 on, your from your friendly local game store.
Right.
Support your friendly local game store. They need the business, right?
Definitely, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
is called The Exquisite Storymatic. And it's basically like Exquisite Corpse for those of you who have some, kind of some knowledge of Victorian party games. The basic idea here is that in this case, one person draws two character cards and two circumstance cards, the copper cards. And then that person begins a story by writing a sentence at the top of the sheet of paper, passing the paper to your left. So what ends up happening is, and you could do this in a Google Doc, right? Super easy, right? What ends up happening is the class is engaged in collaboratively building the story and telling the story. Now, obviously, the act of building a story together is inherently community building, okay? Particularly if the teacher frames it and structures it in a way that that reinforces some of the classroom culture,
Right.
practices, tendencies, pre-existing traditions that are desired, right?
Right. Right.
But in this case, you get the best development of the culture from the meta conversation about where the story went and how it developed and all of that kind of thing, right? And if you inserted more cards, or if you changed the story, or if you made it harder, or if you made it take strange sort of side quests, or break the class into multiple groups, all starting from the same place, what you're looking for is emergence,
Right.
something that comes
From
from the act of doing the story
right. Right.
that will be the business, right?
Right.
And so uh, when we were when we were talking about it, I was like, oh, dude, the Storymatic,
Yeah.
right? It's great for like not only for classrooms, but for sort of like advisories or icebreaker kind of
Right.
exercises.
Right. Right.
When you want to create a culture, or if you want to sustain a culture,
Right.
right? So that's my sort of first offering,
Right.
the Storymatic,
Storymatic. I
right?
haven't had a chance to play that, but I know I would enjoy using it in my classroom, especially for language learning. I think the one that I was going to share is very similar. Let's see if the picture comes up here. I have it here.
Right.
I'm just going to see if it
Okay.
carries over. Maybe here. Yeah. Okay. It should be showing up there. It's
Okay.
not as clean as I was hoping, but it's down there on the bottom. It's very similar to Storymatic, where it's a tool to help you create stories, and it's a set of dice. So on each dice, you have different little images. A lot of times, my students would say, I think in Taiwan they called me Dustin Teacher. What is this image? So sometimes it's not very clear, which is, I think, kind of fun. With some of the
Right.
dice, you can kind of decide what it is.
Right.
I think online it probably tells you exactly what it is, but I had fun using it in my class, using it for writing as well as just language, kind of just being more comfortable speaking and asking students to use the dice to tell a story. So I thought that was really great when I used it in my normal instruction, and I think it's something that very similar to Storymatic, where it can carry over into this digital environment where, I don't know, maybe you as a teacher, you roll the dice and you take a picture of all of the cubes. You could maybe ask students to tell you how many times to roll it. There's a couple things you can play with as far as incorporating it online too. I know we talked about, like, one thing I think would be really fun is a collaboration where students are given a set of dice, and with that set of dice, maybe 2 or 3 of them pair up and create a story. and another two or three creating a different story with the same set of dice, and you kind of see what story emerges from those dice. But
Yeah, couldn't agree more, right? It's the, put a partnership together, roll the dice, you take a picture of the dice, right? And you sort of send that, you project that into the whatever tool you're using,
right,
right? Google Meet or Classroom or Microsoft Teams, whatever, and then give the students who are working in pairs, okay, write me a story, tell me a story based on these dice, and then again you're back to that kind of notion of emergence, right?
right,
And the playful fun of creating the story becomes what the class sort of remembers, right?
right,
And if the teacher's seeing things in the classroom culture that are problematic, well, make the story about that, tell the story, and then reflect on it about what's not going the way that we might want in our digital classroom,
right,
and hopefully that will raise the bar a little bit, right? Or at least raise the awareness a little bit,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So that they can work on it together to 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 get us back to where, to get them back to where they ought to be,
right.
right? um, you've used story cubes in an ESL context.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's where they're really good, aren't they?
Yeah. It was how the best time using it was with my advanced students, and they just loved writing the story. Like, I think I did it as a kind of warm up activity, or not warm up, but like a class culture building activity where we did the first 20 minutes of class for a couple weeks. And
Right.
each week they didn't want to stop. They wanted to continue with writing the story. It's like, no, well, we have other things we have to take care of. Feel
Right.
free to work on it at home and go ahead and do that
Right.
on your
Right.
own. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and in that regard, in my experience, I used Rory story cubes when I taught game design
Okay.
as basically your warm up. Okay.
Mm. Okay.
So uh, if you're when I taught role playing design and video
Mm.
game design, right? Because what I wanted my students to do was design really rich kind of leveling or content experiences, right? Video games like The Last of Us or Red Dead Redemption, which have a lot of story, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, you got to practice telling stories.
Right.
It's not something you can just kind of do, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of modern day video games now, right? The good ones are the ones with the really compelling storylines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And most of our kids who are middle or high school kids, are playing them, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think about I don't know anything about this game. I don't know why I'm going to raise it, but it is suddenly blown up all over my social media
Yeah.
presence. Animal Crossing?
Mm. I love that game as a kid. Like Nintendo GameCube. It was on the GameCube maybe like I want to say like 20 years ago now. Yeah.
It's that old?
Yeah, the first one. And I think they made another one for DS too, Nintendo DS. But yeah. Yeah, like it's a really good game. I don't think I have enough time to play now. I don't know. I don't know.
I did a little bit of reading about it
Yeah.
when I reached sort of like a critical threshold of my awareness. I'm like, why is everyone I know talking about this game? I don't know
Yeah.
anything about this game, right? But boy, it seems like if a number of your kids are using it, you could pair them together in
Yeah.
some way,
Yeah.
and what the characters are supposed to do and the actions they take and all that could really lead to some super interesting
Right.
um, story development, right? But
Right.
any of those kind of video games,
Yeah.
and could have started from 5 Rory story cubes,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right? Which ultimately is sort of the point I was trying to get my students to understand.
Right.
And at least in my experience, my fellow educators, um, maybe you don't do it every day, but instead of throwing 5 dice or 6, throw 3, right? If you've got younger
Yeah.
students, just throw 2, right? Uh, One of my favorite role playing games of all time, Numenera, has a version basically for young kids called No Thank You Evil.
Mm.
And No Thank You Evil basically has a way of taking a very complicated and rich character generation system and just making it okay. If you've got kids who are 10, take this out.
Right.
7, take this out.
Okay.
4, take this out.
That's perfect.
And
Yeah.
you'll still have something to do, right?
Right.
But yeah, just take it out. You want to make Storymatic more complicated. Well, put the character, the first character card you draw, give 3 contexts
Right.
rather than 1, and that's where it'll be,
Right. Right.
right? And it might be that maybe you create some sort of a competitive framework for your students where if you're able, you roll the story cubes. It's like, I want this story to be about a leprechaun, and if you can incorporate a leprechaun into this story in some way, you get 5 bonus points.
You get it. Yeah.
Right? Something, it's that kind of thing that
Right.
that I find is often highly motivating. What am I going to spend those bonus points on, Dr. Cassie? Oh, nothing. In order to buy any extra credit in this class, it will cost you 10 million bonus points, and you're only getting them 10 at a time. So, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So, in addition to Rory Story Cubes, Storymatic, and other like products, okay.
Right.
When Dustin and I were talking last week, it occurred to me that maybe what might be beneficial if I could figure out how to do it was something akin to a fairly typical tabletop role-playing game, but which might be playable with very large groups and or playable over a lengthier period of time so that a longer term narrative might develop.
Right.
Okay. And as I was chewing this over,
I'm excited for this.
Yeah. Thinking about this with, Dustin and some other friends, it occurred to me that there might be a role-playing engine here. And so starting a week ago, and it just came out today. So this is a crazy, it's only 2,500 words, but this was a pretty crazy project that I just worked on.
Yeah.
It's called When at Last We Are Together Again, a role-playing game of separation, support, and reunion. So basically, here's the idea. It's a simple card-based storytelling role-playing game that a very large group could conceivably play. Essentially, you start the game by separating all of the players from each other. And the gameplay is really straightforward because essentially what's going to happen on a given turn is the person running the game, the teacher, the game master, is going to flip a card from a standard card deck of which you've stripped out the diamonds and the spades. Okay, so you only have the hearts and the clubs. Okay,
right, which is perfect.
Teacher's going to turn over a card, right? Because you have equipment on hand.
Somebody has a deck of cards at home, right? Yeah.
Full stop, right? And if you don't, you could go online and get a simulator, right? But everyone's got a deck of cards, right? So the basic idea is you've got a group of people and they're separated. And let me read to you the separation story, turn 1, okay? You are one member of a class of students visiting the Natural History Museum on a field trip to the big city. After visiting the whole museum and having a big lunch, it's time for you all to leave the museum and go back home. As you're walking towards the big revolving door, you see a kindly old man standing beside a huge stone golden star embedded in the floor. He says, "Step on my magic star, go through the revolving door, and enjoy the adventure." With a musical voice. You think momentarily that this is silly, but why not? You watch your friend step on the star, the kindly old man smiling each time, and you exit the museum. When you step on the magic star, you get a strange energetic feeling in your feet. As you go through the revolving door, you feel momentarily disoriented. When you exit the museum, you find yourself not in the city, but on a dusty dirt pathway cutting through miles and miles of open field. Wildly looking around you, you see only a fork in the road in front of you. Go left, go right, go backwards, but not the city and none of your friends. You feel alone and momentarily frightened, but in the distance you see a mountain from which shines a beacon of light. It lifts your spirits, gives you a sense of perspective and direction. Going backwards is rarely the right answer to any question, but it's clearly the wrong one here. Left or right, both seem equally promising, so you choose one and set off. The game master should now
That's
draw the
awesome.
first card from the deck. Okay, so everyone starts the same way.
Right.
Now, the game master flips a card. Okay, and let's say the game master flips the two of hearts. Okay, the game master then reads, the teacher then reads this text, and it's in a chart in the book. Okay,
Right.
while traveling on the road, quite near to a beach, you encounter a family of talking mice who offer you some sweet smelling cupcakes if you will help them locate their missing uncle, who wandered off in the night. Do you look for the missing uncle on the beach or in the fields? Okay. Now, what happens at this point is all of the players write a sentence or two, not long, just a sentence or two about what they would do. Okay? Everyone finishes, you share out. Okay? Everyone shares. Before the game started, the teacher will have assigned every card, two of hearts, three of hearts, four of hearts, to one player. Okay?
Right.
The two of hearts is the card drawn. Everyone shares. The player with the two of hearts, the teacher says, "Hey, Dustin, you're the two of hearts. Read what you did again." Okay? You read it, and the teacher says, "Class, what does Dustin need to think about? What does he need to know? What has he missed? Give him some help. Support him." Okay?
Right.
The class writes a sentence, just one. Okay? Everyone reads it. The teacher then asks you, "All right, well, what do you do? Uncle on the beach or in the fields?"
Right.
You make a decision.
Yeah.
The teacher tells you what resolves, like in any other story, right? And then you go to the next player.
Right.
Okay? So it's a very simple storytelling game in
Yeah.
which everyone is writing and generating the story on their own. But every now and again, you have the opportunity to imagine the voices of your friends in your head. "Gee, Dustin, that's not a good idea. You ought to do this instead," right?
Yeah.
The six of hearts. You find yourself in a comfortable inn for the evening, and the barman asks you to sing a song to the rest of the guests. Share your story. Do you sing a happy song or a sad one?
Yeah. So
it's stuff like that.
I love
right?
how it focuses on one student at different times. Like that, I think that's perfect because then everyone has an opportunity and they're all playing in the game, but there's
Right.
that one moment where you are the focus of what's going on. And I
Right,
think that's really cool.
Right, because one of the hardest things to do in a role-playing game with more than 5 or 6 people is
Mm.
ever to generate focus,
Right.
right? So making it part of the game's mechanic was, to my way of thinking, the right way, right?
Right.
I'm envisioning, what I've indicated in the rules is the game should resolve after 15 turns, or it can resolve when it resolves, right? So you play it now. Imagine starting your class with this game. It would take 10, 12 minutes maybe to play.
Right.
But the longer you play, the more engaged students would be, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if at day 9 you get to go back to live school, you do the resolution quest, which involves a slightly longer reflection, right?
Right.
And what the player then has is a digital or a physical in a journal story of everything that they did that they can refer back to.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really cool.
And games like this that I've played in the past, it's that journal that referring back to it's like,
That's
oh,
fun.
wow, we
Yeah.
did do
Fun to
that,
look
didn't we?
back. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
So so that's what I sort of threw together.
Yeah, I added it in the comments too. So
Thanks, man.
anyone that was wondering.
Yeah, it's available at Drive Through RPG, which allows people to publish these kind of you know PDFs that are free to download.
Right.
It's called When at Last We Are Together Again, on Drive Through RPG. It's free to download. If you can throw a tip in there if you are so inclined,
Yeah.
or drop a buck or two in, as you are interested, if you wish.
Right,
No need to. And if you play it, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, because again, it felt to me like the urgency of the time
Right. Yeah.
requires get the product out.
Right.
It's a beta. Right?
There's a meme that's going around. It's like so and so famous people created these works of art during different pandemics. I don't know how true this meme is because I didn't go look at the research, but
right.
Yeah, it's one of those moments.
Right. The classic example of that is Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron.
Okay.
Right, which he almost certainly wrote around the time of the Black Death, and it's set basically in in an isolated country manor outside of Florence.
Yeah,
and I clearly, maybe I had that in my head as I was writing this, because the characters, there are 10 of them. Each day they tell each other one story.
Okay.
Right. So for 10 days, 10 stories, 100 stories. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's where kind of my, when I was done from work last week, I would, get a snack, and then I would kind of work on this thing.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah. And by all means, have your kids design their own game. Right. I mean, there's a lot to be said for game design as a, as a way of building connection.
Right. Oh yeah. Right? Yeah.
Something to think about as well. Right.
Yeah. That's what, because I do some design of games. It's very, very hobby right now, or I create like educational games, but I've been wanting to maybe start a game design guild online, but I've never done it before. So it might be a lot of work.
It sure would be. Yeah. I've done a little bit of that when I was back in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
And it's nice to have a community place to go.
Right.
To share and collaborate, to riff. But it's hard.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we wanted to share with you all.
Right.
We'd love to hear if you have other role-playing game ideas, or if you have other perspectives on using games to sustain culture. I mean, 3 tools is probably enough for us to push out. Yeah. We could have pushed out a dozen more, but start with these.
That's what we talked about when we were discussing this week. Is we're also in this new situation. We've used games before, but we've never used games online. And even looking at the board game hobby, I was just watching a video, like 10 games to play remotely with friends, 10 board games to play remotely with friends. And it's really trying to be creative at how to use the games, because you have to probably modify some of the rules to be able to play remotely. So it's I think, a unique puzzle to figure out.
Indeed, but an exciting one.
Right.
Yeah, particularly if you're not using like Tabletop Simulator or Roll20 or a Board Game Arena, all of which are porting physical content into a digital space with varying degrees of sort of success and effectiveness. Right. But yeah, I've used all of those tools. They're all good in their own way.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I've game mastered for years by means of Google Hangouts or Zoom or Skype.
Oh yeah.
Right. If everyone's got the rule book, I'm gaming with adults. I'm presuming that their die rolls are not cheaty. Right. I mean, you just wreck the story if you're going to cheat.
Yeah. Right.
And we're in it for the story. Right.
So. Yeah. Awesome. Well.
Yeah.
thank you so much, John, for chatting. I think this was, I mean, super productive for me meeting with you throughout this week too. Just thinking about
Right. Same.
this
Yeah.
the situation we're in, and next this week I start meeting with students, likely to be supporting some students one-on-one, and I'm trying to consider well, can games play a role in this situation right now, because it's more a support role with these students, with helping them catch up on some of their academic work, or just checking in with students too. So yeah, and thank you for chatting. I think it was super helpful for me. I hope anyone watching or listening gained something out of it too.
Let's hope so. Drop some comments in the Facebook thread on Game Level Learn, on board gaming with education. You can reach me at johncassie@gmail. I always answer. People are always shocked. They write. I always say, "Yeah, write me." And when I write back, I never thought you'd write back.
Right. Yeah.
Why'd you write me then? I said I would write back.
Yeah. Reach out for sure.
Yeah, reach out for sure. And if you're in Southern California,
oh yeah,
both Dustin and I are in Southern California.
Yeah, social distancing now though. But.
Right, we're social distancing now. But back in the the days, BC, before coronavirus, we'd getting together live, and we'd love to play some games with you if you're in Southern California.
Yeah, definitely.
And to hear your thoughts and to see your faces, and let's build the community, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So thanks, man.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, John. I'm gonna just end it here.
Okay. Cheers.
If I can find the end button. Maybe you just got to keep smiling until I end.
Okay, I can stretch. I've been on television. To stretch, right?